And now I'd like to introduce you to someone I have had the honor and privilege to work with, but also learn from and be inspired by. I know you will be too if you haven't already. He has been listed as one of Inman's most influential people in real estate for 11 consecutive years, in the Swanepoel 200 every year since its inception, and he recently earned its 2018 Visionary Award. He was recognized as the inaugural Peter Shutterworth MLS Executive Award of Excellence from CMLS. Somebody should talk to them about that name, it's long. And the National Homeownership Award from Riz Media. Many other things that can be added to that list. But ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Chief Strategy Officer and Director for Bright MLS, your 2018 Chair, Mr. David Sharon.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Danae, very much. That's very nice. When I started in this industry back in 1968, it was a pretty tumultuous year, and it was filled with lots of triumphs and tragedies. We lost some real heroes that year: Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, Dwayne Hodges from the USS Pueblo, among them. But we also reached new heights. The first Boeing 747 took off, and some of you may remember that Apollo 8 made it around the moon. There I was, eager to start my career, my journey in real estate, but not exactly sure where this journey would take me. I couldn't Google the answer. Online generally referred to a power grid or a manufacturing process. In printer and publishing parlance, where I started, it meant the type was set, the plates were burned, and production had started. That fit with the real estate at the time. It really did. It was all very, very tactile. We put everything on sheets and books, and in a world of newspapers, it really meant news on paper. Incidentally, the cost of a new home was $26,000, and a gallon of gas was about 34 cents. Mobile meant you had a car. Local phone numbers had 6 or 7 digits. Xerox came up with a fax machine. The point is, I really didn't know where the industry was going. Collectively, we probably didn't either, but we were moving along. 3 decades earlier, the creation of the Federal Housing Commission revolutionized home financing and home ownership. That was comforting, for sure. But not everything was perfect. The FHA, for instance, had endorsed the Homeowners Loan Coalition underwriting handbook for years. And this was the handbook that came complete with neighborhood classifications that largely divided occupation, income, and ethnicity in an attempt, purported attempt, to eliminate the subjectivity of appraisers. Some of you remember that green was good, homogeneous for American businesses and professional men. Blue was still desirable, expected to remain stable. Yellow was in decline, or bordering black communities. And red, well, that's where the term redline came in. Red meant there was black and low-income areas that were not ideal for lending. All of that. Everything that we all knew about home financing for decades had to be shaken to its core. And thankfully, in 1968, the same year I started, it was. We passed a timely federal new law to ensure that something that most of us take for granted now, equal housing, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, sex, national origin, all of that was eliminated. NAR, I might add, was in support of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. Was an amendment, they made an amendment in 1988, or supported an amendment in 1988, that extended the same protection to children and persons with disabilities. So things needed to change, and that's an example of things that we changed for the better. In the years that followed, the next big lesson that we needed to learn was to let go of much of what had gotten us to that point. And I don't mean just housing classifications, I mean everything. We had to move away from basic information and publishing in a tactile form. And we had to adapt to a jumble of innovations, the introduction of online systems, the integration of images in public records, the formation of a regional MLS, and eventually to portals that responded to consumer preferences that literally decimated newspaper revenue streams, like the classified section, up to today where we've got tools introduced by cool new companies like W&R and HomeSnap and RealScout and Remine, and the list goes on. We did all this hard work and we finally landed in a place that we wanted to be, only to find out that we weren't done. So we slogged ahead, maybe not quite as quickly as we'd like, but we did slog ahead. We all adapted as we needed to adapt. Some of us led, some of us followed, and it was all okay because the one thing that remained common amongst all of us was that the MLS had been the de facto local market exchange for more than 100 years. Maybe several hundred years, depending on who you ask, but anyway, it was comforting for sure. We were also increasingly required to manage more and more complex issues, political, technological, financial, personnel. We were increasingly required to manage greater expectations from shareholders, from directors, from customers, and from our staff, and from our technology partners. All of us watched, and over time, our margin for error shrank. Time spans for measurable achievement of objectives were shortened. Some of us even tried to play it safe rather than risk our positions or our place at the table. But still, it was comforting. And then these other people showed up, you know, the pundits and the critics, people like Rob Hahn and Brad Inman and Stefan Swanepoel and the Wave Group, and yes, Greg Robertson. Each of them very different, but all very critical, sometimes constructively, sometimes not, of our collective progress or lack thereof. And then brokers, angry at themselves, and those who may have contributed to their profitability challenges, created their own network moment and essentially said at this very conference 5 years ago, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Is it any wonder that we walked away from that conference and reapplied our energies and we trusted our instincts and we recommitted to delivering continuous improvement? We were suddenly re-inspired, if you will, by the idea of innovation. At the same time, in true schizophrenic form, we were also threatened by it. Or as Danae said, we finally started working on the space between where we were and where we wanted to be. For me personally, it took longer than I'd like to admit to make market consolidation work. I'm guilty. I wasn't immediately willing to let go of most of what had gotten me to this point. I had no experience in blowing up a very successful company. From what I've seen, though, people will soon forget if your deliverable is late and right. What they won't forget is if you are on time and wrong. They get pissed, and maybe forever. It's clear to me that the MLS industry needs to define and defend its value proposition. This is what our customers do every day. Why shouldn't we be expected to do the same thing? But maybe we can do it together. Competition in this industry, in this MLS industry, is not going to come from a contiguous neighbor. You're going to get pressure from the contiguous neighbor. It's going to come from listing clubs and for brokers fighting for differentiation, off-market sales, portals, some of whom are going beyond being a media partner, customers, most importantly, who don't care about boundaries, and money, lots and lots of money. Money will continue to chase money into these models until the market proves them world beaters or sinkholes. Media outlets will continue to amplify their proclamations and publicity pitches because it sells. And do you know why everyone's being attracted to this space? When some people aren't willing to break from the status quo, there will always be others who are in a hurry to do it better. They rewrite the rules, they capitalize on new models, they steal market share, they force downsizing, and then the rush will really be on with new models, new faces, new money, new rules of engagement. Suddenly it might not be so comforting. Everybody wants solutions, but the only real solution is what it has always been. You have to be part of the change. You cannot hang on to something as archaic as neighborhood classifications because it's comfortable. Instead, you write laws that kill it. There are 650 MLSs out here right now, many of us essentially doing the same work. How can we cooperate more effectively? CMLS has emerged as a true leader in this industry to help guide us through these transitions. How can you support CMLS that in turn supports your respective agendas? All of us, everyone in this room is wedded to a financial model that needs lots of members to satisfy the beast. How can we supplant that model before things get even more out of control? These are the issues and the ideas that the MLS industry has yet to address. When are we going to come up with a strategic, customer, consumer-minded model instead of one that is based on risk aversion? I understand it's not easy. The lines are blurring. We're all anxious and increasingly impatient. How many of us are really doing anything different than we were 12, 24, 36 months ago? And if we're not, what are we going to be doing 36 months from now? So I would say this: if you're looking for comfort, I have news for you. Anyone in this room who thinks they are too big or too small or too unique is wrong. Anyone who thinks they are too old, too steeped in their ways to make meaningful changes is wrong. Anyone who is willing to accept the risk of being railed at, unwilling to accept the risk of being railed at by your leadership or by your shareholders for being committed to exploring alternatives is wrong. There is an undeniable imperative to set our sights on something new and tangible now. In my mind, this means consolidation. Now, I don't just mean consolidation of markets. Call it collaboration or cooperation or in concert if you must. What I'm talking about is things like consolidation of data or consolidation of redundant activities like purchasing, compliance, licensing of data, and customer support, or consolidation of resources that are needed for the development of new tools, integration of these new tools and services by enlightened third parties, or new partnership with key technical vendors that are eager to meet our requirements, many of them right outside these doors. Over the years, I've learned that the primary job of every CEO is to establish a vision, secure the funding, get the requisite permissions, and execute. It's that simple. And every successful CEO I know appreciates the job comes with a sense of urgency that is fundamentally part of their DNA. Do you have that same sense of urgency? To that end, I thought it was appropriate that Danae ask all of us to become part of the solution. And I suspect our next speaker will also very appropriately state when she talks to us about what it takes to be a leader. I'm a bit more inclined to tell you how it is. Ladies and gentlemen, we have become an anxious nation and an anxious industry. Words are flying, and many of us find ourselves in the crossfire. And what was once a dog whistle is now a scream. But we don't need to white-knuckle our way through this next phase of our industry. We can't allow ourselves to take the easy way out and essentially kick the can down because there's no clear option. We should do nothing. We can't say that. We cannot let current views or long-held positions cast any shade on a new reality. This new reality must be a future we envision despite the fact that it is not currently within reach and yet not out of the realm of possibility. Cooperation amongst and between participants must be our North Star and the only bridge to the future that we should attempt to salvage. Everything, and I mean everything else, is noise. So if we're not actively working, collaborating, debating with the amazing people in this room, then I don't see how that's any different than hanging on to housing classifications that were wrong-headed. The sheets and the books that we abandoned, or even the fax machine that Xerox came up with. Now more than ever, each of us is required to place greater reliance on others in order to help us move this industry forward. We can't do it by ourselves. That's the only way we will be able to fill the space that gets us from here to there, or wherever it is you want to take it. Thank you very much. So I want to take a moment to shift gears a little bit and thank directors that are stepping away from CMLS. These guys have done a great job and a great service for everyone in this room. They have committed time and again their talent to this organization, all on your behalf. So I'd ask that each come up and be acknowledged by the audience. Tim Dane from St. Louis. Stephanie Hill from Las Vegas. Richard Renton from Triad. and our good friend Michael Werzer from FBS. And true to form, last but certainly not least, Lauren Hansen, who has individually given 8 or 9 years to this organization. 23, I don't know. 8 years to this organization. Thank you all. Now, I will tell you that I'm going to be counting on you because none of you go off until the end of the year. So we've got a strat planning session in December in your hometown. So I look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank these people.